Chapter 1. The Quiet Town. The town of Willowbrook lay tucked between rolling hills and whispering forests, a place so small that news rarely travelled farther than the weekly market square. Its cobblestone streets twisted gently around ivy-clad cottages, and the river that wound lazily along its edge seemed to dictate the very pace of life, slow, predictable, unchanging. Kevin often thought of Willowbrook as a snow globe, sealed away, shaken occasionally, but always settling back into the same scene. At 23, he worked in his uncle's bookstore, a narrow shop squeezed between the bakers and the tailors. Dust motes drifted constantly in the sunlight that slanted through the tall windows, and the air smelled faintly of ink and parchment. Most days passed in silence. A bell above the door would ring occasionally, admitting Mrs. Hanover, who read romance novels with a sly smile as though they were forbidden fruit, or old Mr. Brinley, who pretended to buy history books only to complain loudly about how the authors got it all wrong. Kevin would smile politely, wrap their purchases, and return to his quiet. It wasn't that Kevin disliked books, on the contrary, he loved them. They were his only escape, his only chance to glimpse places he had never seen and lives he would never live. But as much as he devoured their stories, he couldn't shake the ache in his chest, the sense that his own story hadn't truly begun. At night, when the shop was locked and his uncle snored softly in the next room, Kevin would climb the hill overlooking the town. From there, Willowbrook looked almost magical, the glow of lanterns casting golden pools of light, smoke curling lazily from chimneys, the faint hum of crickets in the grass. And towering above it all, like a dark guardian, was the clock tower. The clock tower had stood for centuries, its stone walls cracked and weathered, its great clock face frozen at 11:42. The villagers avoided it, muttering about curses and ill fortune, but Kevin couldn't stay away. Something about it called to him. It stood silent and broken, much like the town itself, yet it also felt alive, watching, waiting. He would sit in the grass for hours, staring at the stars that glittered beyond the tower's silhouette. Sometimes he tried to imagine himself leaving, walking past the hills, crossing forests, following roads that stretched farther than the horizon. Other times, he whispered into the night, as though the universe might hear him. "There must be more," he would say quietly. "More than this. More than waiting. More than Willowbrook." He never expected an answer. Yet in the stillness of the night, with the wind brushing against the tower and the stars shimmering like secrets overhead, it sometimes felt as though the world was holding its breath, waiting, just as he was. And then, one ordinary morning, everything did change. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss more eerie and fascinating tales. Chapter 2. The Strange Letter. The morning that changed everything began like any other. Kevin rose to the creak of the floorboards above the shop, the scent of his uncle's tea drifting faintly from the kitchen below. The day was grey, clouds smothering the sun, and a thin mist clung to the cobblestones outside. Willowbrook was quiet in the mornings, the kind of quiet that felt less like peace and more like slumber. Kevin unlocked the bookstore as he always did, sweeping the steps and straightening the display of novels in the window. He expected nothing unusual, only the slow trickle of customers, the scratch of his pen as he recorded sales, and the comforting, if monotonous, silence of the shop. But when he bent to collect the morning post from the doorstep, he froze. Among the usual bills and folded advertisements was a single envelope, cream-colored and sealed with a wax emblem he didn't recognize. There was no name written on the front. No address. Just a thick smear of red wax pressed into a shape too worn to identify. Kevin turned it over in his hands, his heart beating faster. His first thought was that it must be for his uncle, but the envelope was addressed to neither of them. It was not addressed at all. Against all reason, he felt certain it was meant for him. He glanced around the empty square, half expecting to see someone lurking in the mist, watching to make sure he had received it. But the streets were empty, save for a stray cat winding its way along a wall. With hesitant fingers, Kevin broke the seal. Inside was a single slip of parchment. The handwriting was sharp and deliberate, the ink slightly smudged as though the words had been written in haste. "Your path awaits at the old clock tower. At sunset. Come alone." Kevin read the words again and again, his pulse quickening. A dozen questions flooded his mind. Who had written this? Why him? And why the clock tower, the one place most people in Willowbrook avoided? He slipped the letter into his pocket just as his uncle entered the shop, humming under his breath. Kevin forced himself into motion, dusting the counter, shelving books, going about his daily routine as though nothing had happened. But his thoughts never left the letter. All day, it burned in his mind like a brand. Customers came and went, but he hardly noticed their faces. The letter was a riddle with no answer, and the words echoed with every passing hour. Your path awaits. At sunset. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the clouds with streaks of orange and crimson, Kevin could no longer resist. He told his uncle he would be out for a walk and slipped away before he could be questioned. The streets grew darker as he made his way uphill, the familiar cobblestones slick with evening dew. His footsteps echoed in the stillness, every sound amplified by his nerves. The clock tower loomed above him, its broken face reflecting the last glimmers of sunlight. Kevin's hand brushed the letter in his pocket, his stomach tight with both fear and anticipation. For years, he had begged the universe for something more, for a change, a sign, a chance to break free of Willowbrook's slumbering grip. Now, as he stood at the foot of the clock tower, staring at its heavy wooden door, he realized the universe might have finally answered. Chapter 3: The Clock Tower's Secret. The wooden door of the clock tower loomed taller than Kevin remembered, its surface warped with age, its iron handle cold beneath his hand. For a moment he hesitated, heart hammering, glancing over his shoulder to see if anyone had followed him. The hill was empty, the town below a scatter of lantern lights glowing faintly through the mist. He pushed. The door groaned on rusted hinges, releasing a breath of stale, dust-choked air that smelled of stone and forgotten time. Kevin slipped inside and pulled the door shut behind him. The sudden silence pressed heavy in his ears. The interior was darker than he expected, shadows curling up the spiral staircase that twisted along the tower's wall. His footsteps echoed softly as he crossed the floor, his fingers brushing against broken gears and fallen beams. Once, this tower had been a proud machine of time, its inner workings polished and precise. Now, it was nothing more than a graveyard of iron teeth and shattered glass. Kevin lifted the letter from his pocket, staring at the words again. Your path awaits at the old clock tower. At sunset. Come alone. I'm here, he whispered into the gloom, his voice almost swallowed by the tower's vast silence. Now what? The only answer was the faint tick of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. He began to climb. Each step creaked beneath his weight, dust rising with every movement. He passed broken windows where ivy had crept inside, its green tendrils curling across the stone. Higher and higher he went, until the staircase opened onto the tower's main chamber, the place where the great clock face stretched wide, its hands forever frozen at 11:42. Kevin crossed the chamber slowly. The moon shone faintly through the fractured glass, casting pale light across the floor. He expected nothing, and yet, something felt wrong. Out of place. As though the room was holding its breath, waiting. That was when he noticed the floor. A seam of stone at the chamber's center, forming a rough square. Kneeling, he brushed away centuries of dust and found a faint iron ring embedded in the stone. His pulse quickened. He hooked his fingers through the ring and pulled. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding groan, the stone shifted, sliding open to reveal a dark shaft yawning beneath him. A spiral staircase wound downward, vanishing into the earth. Kevin stared into the darkness, every instinct telling him to stop, to turn back, to leave the secrets of the tower buried. And yet, he couldn't. He had asked for more. For something to break the monotony of Willowbrook. And now, here it was. He lit a stub of candle from his pocket, one he always carried for reading at night, and held it high. The flame flickered weakly but cast just enough glow to reveal the first few steps. He drew a steadying breath, tucked the letter back into his coat, and began to descend. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. The staircase spiraled endlessly, the walls slick with damp stone, until at last it opened into a hidden chamber. Kevin stepped inside and lifted the candle high. Rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with old books, faded maps, and brittle journals bound in cracked leather. A thick layer of dust coated everything, disturbed only by his footprints. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. And on the pedestal lay a curious object, a brass key, heavy and ornate, its teeth carved in strange, looping shapes. Kevin reached out, his hand trembling, and closed his fingers around it. The metal was cold, but the moment he touched it, he felt something stir in the air, like the tower itself had awakened. Behind him, somewhere in the shadows, a floorboard creaked. Kevin spun, candle flickering wildly, his breath catching in his throat. He was not alone. Chapter 4: The Underground Room. The flame of Kevin's candle guttered as though stirred by a breath that did not belong to him. He froze, clutching the brass key tightly, his eyes darting into the shadows. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice too soft, too fragile to carry in the vastness of the hidden chamber. No reply came, only silence thick enough to press against his ears. The creak he had heard could have been nothing more than the groan of the old tower, or the shifting of damp stone. Yet Kevin's heart insisted otherwise. He forced himself to move, raising the candle higher. The shelves stretched on, endless rows of journals, rolled maps, and odd relics half-swallowed by dust. Some objects glittered faintly beneath the layer of grime, a silver compass, a cracked monocle, a dagger whose blade was blackened with age. The air smelled of parchment and rust, as though the room had been waiting centuries for someone to disturb it. Kevin set the candle on the pedestal and began to examine the shelves. He pulled down a journal, its leather cover brittle in his hands. The first page was scrawled in spidery handwriting: "The treasure must never fall into the wrong hands. It is not wealth they will find here, but power, the kind that can protect or destroy." His brow furrowed. Treasure. Power. The words stirred a mix of excitement and unease. Flipping through, he found sketches of the clocktower's foundations, maps of the forest beyond Willowbrook, and diagrams of strange symbols carved into stone. One sketch in particular caught his eye, a drawing of the very brass key he now held. Beside it, written in bold ink, were 3 words: "The Guardian waits." Kevin's stomach tightened. He glanced at the key in his hand, its ornate teeth glinting faintly in the candlelight. Was this his destiny? Or was he stumbling blindly into a trap laid long ago? A sound broke his thoughts, the soft scrape of stone against stone. Slowly, he turned toward the far end of the chamber. There, hidden behind a shelf, was another passageway, a narrow archway carved directly into the wall. Faint currents of air drifted from it, cooler than the chamber around him. His grip tightened on the candle and the key. Every rational part of him screamed to go back. To return to the safety of the shop, to pretend this never happened, to live quietly among the books and routines of Willowbrook. But his restless heart, the same heart that had whispered for more under the stars night after night, urged him forward. Kevin stepped through the archway. The narrow corridor wound downward, rough-hewn and damp, the walls etched with symbols he did not understand. His candle flame threw them into sharp relief: swirls, eyes, runes that seemed to twist when he stared too long. At last, the corridor widened into a second chamber. This one was vast, the ceiling lost in darkness, its walls lined not with shelves but with carved murals. They depicted figures in cloaks, battles fought with strange weapons, and a circle of fire encasing something at the center, something that looked eerily like the brass key. At the heart of the room, a stone dais rose from the floor. And beyond it, just barely visible in the dim glow of his candle, stood a figure. Kevin's breath caught. He thought it a statue at first, tall and unmoving, draped in a long cloak. But then the figure shifted ever so slightly, as though it had been waiting for him. The flame in his candle flickered violently, nearly extinguishing. Kevin swallowed hard. His whisper cracked in the silence. "Who are you?" The figure raised its head, and for the first time Kevin saw its eyes, burning like embers in the dark. Chapter 5: A Shadow in the Woods. The eyes glowed like coals, steady and unblinking. Kevin stumbled back a step, his candle quivering in his hand. The figure did not move closer, yet its presence filled the vast chamber like a tide rising to swallow him. He wanted to run. He wanted to turn and scramble up the stairway, leave the tower behind, and never return. But his legs refused to obey. Some invisible thread bound him in place, rooted by equal parts fear and fascination. The figure spoke at last. Its voice was low and rough, like stone grinding against stone. "You carry the key." Kevin's throat went dry. He held up the brass object almost defensively, its cold weight heavy in his palm. I just found it." I don't even know what it opens. The ember eyes flared faintly. It does not open. It awakens. Before Kevin could demand what that meant, the figure stepped back, melting into the shadows as though it had never been there at all. The chamber grew colder, and the candle guttered nearly to nothing. Panic surged in Kevin's chest. He turned and fled, his footsteps echoing wildly against the stone as he scrambled back through the corridor, up the spiral stairs, and into the clocktower's upper chamber. By the time he burst through the wooden door and into the night air, his lungs were burning, and the cool wind felt like salvation. He staggered down the hill, clutching the key so tightly his knuckles ached. Willowbrook lay below, serene and unchanged, lanterns glowing warmly in the square as though nothing had happened. The sight should have comforted him, but it only deepened the dissonance in his chest. Because he was no longer the same. Kevin made his way through the quiet streets, his mind replaying the glowing eyes, the rumbling voice, the strange words. It does not open. It awakens. What had he stumbled into? And why him? By the time he reached the bookstore, the night was thick with fog. He slipped inside, careful not to wake his uncle, and collapsed onto his bed without undressing. But sleep did not come easily. When he finally drifted off, his dreams were filled with shifting shadows, endless forests, and the faint sound of stone grinding against stone. The next morning, Kevin awoke with the key still clenched in his hand. He tucked it deep into his coat pocket, as though hiding it could somehow erase the night before. He told himself he would forget it all, that he would focus on work, on the quiet safety of books and customers, on normalcy. But fate had other plans. By late afternoon, he found himself restless again. His uncle sent him into the woods to gather firewood, a chore Kevin had done countless times. Yet as he ventured deeper among the trees, the shadows between the trunks seemed longer, darker, heavier than usual. The forest was alive with the usual sounds, the chatter of birds, the rustle of leaves, but beneath them, Kevin sensed something else. A presence. A weight pressing against him, unseen but unmistakable. He paused, balancing the bundle of wood in his arms. His breath misted in the cool air. The silence thickened. And then he saw it. A figure between the trees. Just beyond the edge of his vision, tall and still. Watching. Kevin's blood ran cold. He blinked, and it was gone. The shadows swayed with the wind, innocent once more, but the pounding of his heart told him he had not imagined it. He dropped the bundle of wood and turned, running as fast as his legs would carry him. Branches whipped against his face, roots snagged at his boots, but he didn't dare stop. The forest was no longer just trees and leaves, it was a maze of eyes, of whispers, of unseen footsteps following just behind him. When at last he broke free into the clearing near Willowbrook, he collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The bundle of firewood was lost, his hands scraped and raw. And though the clearing was empty, Kevin knew one thing with certainty. He was being hunted. Chapter 6, The Chase. Kevin pressed his back to the tree, his breath shallow and ragged. The silence of the clearing was wrong, too deep, too heavy. The ordinary sounds of the forest had vanished as though swallowed whole. His fingers dug into the brass key inside his coat pocket. It felt warm now, faintly pulsing against his palm, as though responding to the presence that stalked him. He clenched it tighter, unsure whether it was a weapon, a curse, or merely a weight that would drag him down when he needed to run. A twig snapped. Kevin spun toward the sound. At the far edge of the clearing, half shrouded in mist, the figure stood once more. Tall. Motionless. Cloaked in shadow. Fear exploded through him like lightning. He ran. Branches clawed at his face, his boots slipping in the damp earth as he plunged back into the trees. His breath came in ragged gasps, the pounding of his heart loud in his ears. Yet beneath it, he could hear something else, footsteps, steady and relentless, always just behind him. He dared a glance over his shoulder. Nothing. Only shadows twisting with the sway of branches. But he knew he was being followed. The forest thickened, paths twisting into each other until Kevin no longer knew which way was home. Panic threatened to unravel him, but instinct pushed him onward. His legs burned, his chest ached, and still he ran. At last, he stumbled into a narrow gully where moss-clad stones rose like teeth from the earth. He slid down the slope, mud coating his palms, and crashed to his knees at the bottom. For a heartbeat, he thought he had lost it. The forest was still again, the air heavy with damp earth and the faint drip of water. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. The shadow slid down the slope with impossible grace, silent, unstoppable. Kevin scrambled backward, his hands scraping stone. His fingers brushed something strange, a seam in the rock wall behind him. He turned, heart hammering, and saw what looked like the outline of a door carved into the stone. In the center of the outline was a keyhole. His breath caught. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling free the brass key. It glimmered faintly in the dim light, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Behind him, the figure was closing in, its presence suffocating, its ember eyes glowing faintly through the mist. Kevin shoved the key into the hole. For a terrifying second, it did not fit. Then, with a twist, it slid into place. The stone door groaned, ancient gears grinding deep within the rock. Slowly, it shifted, opening just wide enough for Kevin to squeeze through. He hurled himself inside, pulling the key free as he went. The stone door rumbled shut behind him, sealing off the gully and the shadow beyond. Darkness swallowed him whole. Kevin collapsed against the cold stone, gasping, sweat dripping down his face. His candle had long been lost in the chase, leaving him blind in the blackness. But even in the dark, he could feel it, the faint warmth of the key in his hand, guiding him forward. He was safe, for now. But he also knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 7, The Keyhole. The stone chamber Kevin found himself in was small and almost impossibly dark. The air was damp, carrying the earthy scent of centuries-old rock, and the faint echo of dripping water resounded through the space. He pressed his back against the wall, his hands still clutching the brass key. Even in the darkness, he could feel its weight and the strange pulse emanating from it, like the heartbeat of the chamber itself. Kevin forced himself to stand and take stock of the room. It was empty, or so it seemed. The walls were rough-hewn stone, slick with moisture. The floor was uneven, jagged in places, as if the chamber had been carved quickly, in secret. A narrow tunnel led deeper, disappearing into blackness. The faint draft coming from it carried a subtle scent of metal and moss, and Kevin instinctively knew that this tunnel was the only way forward. He stepped cautiously toward the passage, testing the floor with every step. His mind raced. The brass key had brought him here, but why? And what did the shadow in the woods want? Kevin shook off the rising panic. He had faced fear before, but never like this, never a fear that whispered as much as it shouted, that seemed to stalk him even when unseen. At the end of the tunnel, he found it, a stone door, carved seamlessly into the rock, with a single keyhole glowing faintly in the dim light. The outline of the keyhole pulsed like the ember eyes of the shadow he had just escaped. Kevin's pulse quickened. The key fit. It had to. He inserted it slowly, feeling the teeth of the brass key click against the stone. A shiver ran up his spine as he twisted it. The sound of grinding stone echoed through the chamber, louder than he expected, and the door shuddered. With a final, ear-splitting groan, it began to swing open, revealing a hidden cavern bathed in soft, golden light. Kevin stepped through the threshold, blinking against the sudden brightness. The cavern stretched wider than any room he had ever seen, walls lined with crystalline formations that shimmered like frozen flames. Strange symbols were etched into the floor, glowing faintly as if alive. In the center, a pedestal rose from the stone floor, and on it rested a small chest of dark, polished wood. Kevin's heart raced. This was it, the heart of the mystery. He approached the pedestal cautiously, the key still in his hand. As he reached the chest, he noticed the air shift. The cavern felt alive. A subtle hum filled the space, vibrating through his bones. And then, from the far side of the chamber, a soft sound reached his ears. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Someone, or something, was watching. Kevin froze. The key pulsed warmer in his hand. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "I didn't come this far to turn back now." With trembling hands, he lifted the lid of the chest. Inside was not gold, nor jewels, but something far stranger. A bundle of scrolls, a small crystal orb, and an ancient book, its cover inscribed with the same symbols that lined the cavern. He lifted the book carefully. The moment his fingers touched it, A voice echoed in the chamber, low, commanding, and familiar. "You have found it," the voice said. "But are you ready to wield the responsibility it carries?" Kevin's stomach twisted. He looked around, but saw nothing, no figure, no shadow. Yet the voice was everywhere and nowhere, filling the cavern with its authority. Swallowing hard, he whispered, I think I am." The voice rumbled softly, almost approvingly. "Then prepare yourself. The path you have chosen will not be easy, and those who watch from the darkness will not rest until it is taken from you." Kevin held the book tightly. He knew in that moment that his life had changed forever. The quiet world of Willowbrook, the simple days of the bookstore, the comfort of predictability, they were gone. Ahead lay danger, mystery, and power he barely understood. And somewhere beyond the cavern, he knew the shadow was waiting. Chapter 8, The Guardian. Kevin stepped carefully out of the golden-lit cavern, the ancient book clutched tightly to his chest. The air grew cooler as he moved deeper into the twisting passageways beneath the clocktower, the soft glow from the crystal orb in the chest illuminating the jagged walls. Each step echoed like a drumbeat in the silence, and Kevin felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing on him. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Shadows danced along the walls, cast by the faint luminescence of crystals embedded in the rock. In the center of the room stood a figure taller than any man Kevin had ever seen. Cloaked in dark fabric that seemed to absorb light, it radiated authority and power, its eyes glowing faintly like embers in the gloom. Kevin froze, every instinct screaming at him to flee. But curiosity and a strange sense of purpose anchored him in place. Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The figure's cloak rustled as it moved slightly, though it made no sound of footsteps. Its eyes fixed on Kevin with piercing intensity. "I am the Guardian," the figure said, voice deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. "And you, Kevin, have entered a world you barely understand." Kevin swallowed. I only wanted to protect my home. That's why I came here. I didn't." The Guardian raised a hand, stopping him. "Intent matters, yes. But understanding does not yet. This place, the knowledge within these walls, the power you now hold, it is not a gift. It is a responsibility." Kevin's grip on the book tightened. Responsibility. The Guardian stepped closer, and Kevin felt the heat of unseen energy radiating from the figure. "Yes. The power you hold can protect, or it can destroy. Willowbrook has slept peacefully for centuries, shielded from dangers it cannot perceive. The choice to guard it has always required one who is willing to bear the weight alone." Kevin's stomach churned. "And what if I'm not ready?" The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment, Kevin felt as if it could see into the deepest corners of his mind. "Then others will rise, as they always have, and the shadows you fled will not relent. You have been chosen because of your courage, and because your heart is untainted by greed or fear. But courage alone is not enough. Wisdom, patience, and vigilance will be required." Kevin exhaled slowly, trying to steady his racing heart. "So, I'm supposed to stay here? Protect Willowbrook? Even from what?" The Guardian inclined its head slightly. "From what hides in the darkness. From those who seek to claim the power for themselves. From the shadows that would see your world undone. You are not alone, Kevin. You will be tested, tempted, and challenged. But if you succeed, you will become the shield between your home and the chaos beyond." Kevin's mind raced. It sounded impossible. Terrifying. Yet, a spark of determination ignited within him. For years, he had wished for more than the quiet of Willowbrook, and now he had it, a chance to shape destiny itself. I'll do it," he said, his voice firmer this time. "I'll protect Willowbrook." The Guardian regarded him silently, the ember-like eyes watching, weighing, approving. Finally, it spoke. "Then rise, Kevin. Accept the mantle. Learn what must be learned, and know that once the path is taken, there is no turning back. The shadows are patient, but they are not infinite. Remember this, strength without understanding is peril. Guard wisely." With that, the Guardian stepped back, dissolving slowly into the darkness of the cavern. Kevin was left alone, the glow of the crystals reflecting off the ancient symbols etched into the walls. He looked down at the book in his hands, feeling the weight of its knowledge and the key to the brass treasure. For the first time in his life, Kevin understood that his quiet days in Willowbrook were gone. Ahead lay challenges he could not yet imagine, threats he had never seen, and responsibilities heavier than he had ever known. But for the first time, he also felt ready. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the book and key, and whispered to the shadows, "I'm ready." The cavern remained silent, but Kevin could sense the unseen watchers in the dark, waiting, testing, and judging. And he knew that the journey, the true journey, was only beginning. Chapter 9, The Choice. Kevin emerged from the cavern into the crisp night air, the weight of the brass key and the ancient book pressing against his chest. The forest around Willowbrook was quiet, yet it felt alive in a way he had never noticed before. The rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, even the distant cry of an owl seemed purposeful, as if the woods themselves were aware of what he carried, and of what he must decide. He wandered to the hill overlooking the town, where the clock tower rose like a sentinel against the starlit sky. Its frozen hand seemed almost impatient now, as though aware that Kevin's moment of choice had arrived. He sank onto the damp grass, the book open in his lap, and traced the symbols with his fingers. The pages hummed faintly under his touch. Words he had never seen before shifted subtly, glowing faintly as if alive. Kevin felt a tremor in his chest, a pull toward something both thrilling and terrifying. The brass key in his pocket pulsed like a heartbeat, its warmth seeping into his fingers. He thought of the Guardian's words, "Strength without understanding is peril. Guard wisely." Kevin's mind raced. He could feel the power inside the book calling to him, promising knowledge, control, and influence beyond anything Willowbrook had ever known. And yet, along with that promise came the weight of responsibility. He could use it to protect, as the Guardian had said, or it could fall into the wrong hands, and then all the quiet streets, the peaceful homes, and the people he cared about would be at risk. He closed his eyes and imagined the shadow from the forest, watching, waiting, patient and relentless. He imagined the chaos that could follow if he refused to act. And he imagined himself, forever safe in the quiet life of the bookstore, never knowing what might have been. The choice was clear. Kevin opened his eyes. His grip on the book tightened. "I will protect Willowbrook," he whispered, his voice carrying a determination that surprised even him. "I will guard it, no matter the cost." At that moment, the air shifted. The glow from the key in his pocket grew brighter, illuminating the hilltop and the clock tower below. Kevin felt a surge of energy ripple through him, like the very heartbeat of the world had synchronized with his own. The shadows in the trees retreated slightly, as if acknowledging his decision, while the stars overhead seemed to shine more clearly. Kevin knew the path ahead would not be easy. He would face trials, confront dangers, and bear burdens no ordinary person could imagine. But he also knew he had chosen rightly, with courage and intent untainted by greed or fear. He rose to his feet, the book still clutched to his chest. The wind tugged at his hair, carrying the faint scent of the cavern, of moss and stone and something ancient. Kevin turned his gaze to the clock tower once more. It was no longer a silent sentinel. It was a symbol of the responsibility he had embraced, a reminder that the world beyond Willowbrook was alive with mystery, danger, and power. And he was ready. For the first time in his life, Kevin felt the thrill of destiny coursing through him, intertwined with the weight of choice and the certainty that his life, and the life of his town, would never be the same again. The night stretched before him, full of possibilities, full of shadows, full of unknowns. And Kevin, once a restless dreamer in a quiet town, was now the Guardian, prepared to meet whatever trials awaited. The path was his to walk. And he would not turn back. Chapter 10, A New Dawn. The first light of morning crept over Willowbrook, spilling gold across the cobblestones and rooftops. The town, so familiar and small, looked different to Kevin now, as if he was seeing it for the first time. Every detail seemed sharper, the curve of the river, the smoke curling from chimneys, the flowers spilling over garden fences. The quiet streets no longer felt constrictive. They felt precious, worth guarding. Kevin descended the hill from the clock tower, the brass key tucked securely in his pocket and the ancient book strapped carefully to his side. He moved with purpose now, No longer the restless dreamer who had gazed at the stars wishing for change. He had found it, and in doing so, he had discovered himself. The town slept, unaware of the invisible threads of protection now woven through its streets. Kevin paused in the square, watching the lanterns flicker in the soft morning breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, and the sound carried with unusual clarity. He thought of the guardian, of the shadow that had stalked him in the woods, and of the cavern hidden beneath the clocktower. Each challenge had tested him, each fear had been a lesson. And now, armed with knowledge and responsibility, Kevin understood the truth of the words spoken in that secret chamber. Power without purpose is meaningless, but purpose can transform even the most ordinary life into something extraordinary. For the first time, Kevin felt a calm certainty. He would protect Willowbrook, not because it was expected, not because he was commanded, but because he had chosen to. Each decision, each moment of courage, would ripple outward, guarding not just buildings and streets, but the very heartbeat of the town he loved. The streets slowly began to stir as villagers emerged from their homes. Kevin greeted them with a smile, ordinary in its warmth yet carrying the weight of someone who had seen the hidden threads of the world. No one could know what he had faced beneath the clocktower, what shadows had chased him, or what powers now rested lightly but firmly in his hands. And yet, Kevin felt no loneliness. He was part of something larger, a chain of guardianship stretching back through time and now forward into the future. The brass key, the book, the secrets of the tower, all of it was his to wield wisely. As he passed the clocktower, he looked up at its frozen face. The hands had not moved, yet to Kevin, the tower no longer seemed stagnant. It was alive, vigilant, and in harmony with him. The tower had waited for him as much as he had longed for it, and together they would stand sentinel over Willowbrook. Kevin lifted his eyes to the horizon. The forest beyond was quiet, yet he knew it held unseen eyes and untold mysteries. He did not fear them. The shadows would come again, but he was ready. With a deep breath, he stepped forward into the day, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face and the cool wind at his back. He was no longer a boy waiting for adventure. He was a guardian, a protector, a keeper of secrets, and the quiet town of Willowbrook would never be the same. The world was vast, full of shadows and light, danger and wonder. And Kevin, standing tall and resolute, was ready to meet it all. A new dawn had risen. And Kevin's journey was only beginning.